We are live. Hello, hello. Do, 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 do. Hello, hello. We will be getting started shortly. We're just waiting for a few people to hop on in before we start. Happy Global Hack Week for September. Super excited. We're going to be having a lot more Global Hack Weeks, and so a lot of opportunities to learn and grow. So this will be exciting. Let me get the check-in link so people hopping in know where to check in. Let's see. Comments. Hello, hello. Yes, hello there. Popping in the check-in link here. So if you have not signed in, please do so that you can get access to, you can get points. I think that's the thing. So there's no challenges with this one. It'll just be learning as much as you can and getting points for participating. So that's all we're looking for here. Hello, Twitch. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook. We're going to get started in 1 minute. Let me change the banner. I love these banners. I don't know why they give me joy. Is there a 1 minute banner? There's not a 1 minute banner, but there is a hang tight. We'll be getting started shortly banner, which is just as good. Hello, hello. This is exciting. I'm excited. I'm excited for this one. After 4 or 5 years of being in college, it all came together for this moment. Who makes the banner? It's a good question. I think that we can customize the banner. I think that StreamYard allows you to customize the banners if you want, but they give you the capabilities. I'm pretty sure MLH probably created these on their own. I should create my own banner. Actually, that might be the move. That might be the move to create my own banner. All right. And so people hopping on, I want to pass on a introductory question or just like an icebreaker, just so that I can see who's in the chat. So first things first, we're going to start with the question. If money and time were no object, like you had infinite time, infinite money, infinite resources, what career or passion would you pursue full time? I'm going to type that in the chat just so that people can see it. Icebreaker Q. Time and money or no object, what passion or hobby would you pursue? I just want to hear. I heard somebody asked me this question before, and it was very interesting. They asked me it a couple days ago, and I was like, that's actually not a bad question. And I thought about it. So what would I do if I had infinite time and money? I always wanted to travel a lot. I think that's probably the most standard answer, is being able to travel or go around the world, to be a photographer. But why wouldn't you? Just because the world's so big and you have such a little time. So that's probably the easiest answer. So we have traveling. Yes, I'm with you right there. Being a park ranger. I've heard that one many times before. It sounds super, super cool. Whether they're like managing like a park or, with animals, or, working in the zoo. I think just being in nature is something that a lot of us need more of. I say that as I have like 3 screens right now preparing for this track. So help cool people with their big ideas. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, it's something I always thought about was, okay, am I going to be the person implementing those ideas, or am I going to be the resource for people who are smarter than I am to do something better? And so, probably a physicist or a mathematician to answer all of those questions in the universe. Ooh, thinking big, dreaming big. I could never be a physicist. I think I struggled in my beginning physics class. Like I just could not handle it. And so as much as cool as it would be, like I think I was a math major for a very short time because I watched Hidden Figures, and I was like, I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna be the girl who like sends people into space. And I took a few math classes that are more like upper level, and I realized, yeah, I can't do that. I can't be a math major. And so learn every skill possible and make something which can change the world. I love that. That's such a, yeah, I think that time is so short. And so we can't learn everything, which is really frustrating. And so like having the ability to just like do something that like changes everything, like curing cancer, or, just solving world hunger, solving homelessness, solving the fundamental human resource problems that exist today. Yeah, those two kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, solving some of the really big issues that we all talk about, but it's always just more complicated than it seems. Okay, 3 minutes past. We have a good sizable amount of people here. I see the icebreaker question coming in, and I'll keep looking at them as we go. Let me get rid of this banner. And let us get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the technical interview prep track. So this is going to be a little bit different than some of the other challenges and streams that are going on right now, which is a lot more, building really, really cool things. If you've seen the list of what's happening, there are really cool events that are going on. And make sure you check in. I believe I added that link to the chat, so please be sure to check in if you haven't already. But this one's going to be a little different. With all of those cool technical projects that you are building, I wanted to create an opportunity to be able to, okay, what are you actually going to do with it? Well, a lot of us are students are looking for a full-time job. And so I wanted to create a track that really focuses on what skills do you need to do it. And so we're going to cover all of that. There's so much information. And so that's what you think that, oh man, like 4 tracks, each of them 2 hours. That's 8 hours worth of content. How are you going to fill it up? Trust me, I'm going to fill up that time. Hello there. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. I am going to go to the next slide. So here what we have is the technical interview prep track breakdown. Oof, that was a mouthful. And so I am broken up. This track is broken up into 4 different parts. The first one, you are here now. Hello, Twitch. A lot of Twitch people. Welcome to the stream. We're just going over the track breakdown. And so part 1, that's what you are watching right now at this moment. We are going to be covering 1, my background. So why am I here? How did I get to this point? Am I qualified to answer these questions? I think I am, but I'll show you that in a little bit. Interviewing basics. So just kind of going over, the different types of interviews that you might encounter for a full-time or internship position, the different types of programs that you can be looking at. And then, of course, we're going to cover behavioral interviews. Parts 2, 3, and 4 are all going to be technical interviews. So those are going to be the ones where I'm going to pull up my like an IDE, and we're actually going to be typing in code and working through problems together. This is going to be the only part that's going to be a lot more of me kind of talking at you, mainly because we're going to be covering behavioral interviews and what that means, which is still a very important part. And so part 2 is going to be the more common interview questions that you get. So that's going to be strings, arrays, dictionary, and that's going to be Monday. And then Thursday is going to be part 3. We're going to cover a bit more advanced topics. You won't see them as often, but they might still show up. And so answering questions related to linked lists, trees, and graphs. And then finally, part 4, which is going to cover pretty much everything else. So kind of covering the A in DS&A. So those algorithms that might come up, some other advanced topics that might come up in a full-time interview, like dynamic programming. And then we're going to wrap everything up. And that will be on Friday. And so as much as I would love for you to be there for every single part of this track, I listed this out so that if you know, like, hey, I think I only need help on linked lists, then you're free to welcome to go to part 3 only if you want, or if you just want to sit back and listen to all of them. Those are the times. I'll be announcing them in the Discord. Make sure that you're on the Discord channel so that you can hear every update that comes your way. All right, hello, people coming in. Hello, YouTube, Twitch. I don't think I've seen it. Oh, wait, no, there's a few Facebook people. No, No, there's not. That was just me. I posted in the chat and I realized, no, that's just me. But if you're on Facebook, hello, or Meta, whatever, right? I'm not going to go over that. All right. So, hello. The agenda. What are we going to be covering today? And so first things first, I'm going to give a disclaimer that's going to cover basically the legal talk, quote unquote, basically covering anything that you need to know, that what I am going to tell you, what I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to be covering all of that in the disclaimer. Then we're going to go over my background. So where have I come from? What am I doing now? How did I get into tech? And then talk about a few interview horror stories. I want it to be more conversational, so I'm going to pick a few interesting stories that I think you guys would like to show that, hey, doing well in interviews are all well and good, but for every good interview that you do, you're probably going to have 5 to 10 interviews that are going to go poorly. Yeah, the only interview guy, only YouTube guy here. hello. Hopefully we get a little bit more. We have a pretty sizable group today. So hopefully we have a few more YouTube people coming in. But yeah, right now it's Twitch dominated. Then after we cover my background, we're going to talk about the different types of interview programs and formats. Please note that it will be applicable to both intern and full-time positions. So whether you're looking for an internship for the summer or whether you're looking for something full-time, hopefully these tips will cover all parts of that. Then we're going to be talking about getting an interview. So in terms of actually applying that and that process, what does that look like and what tools do you need to succeed there? We're going to cover some interviewing frameworks. And so there'll be two. There's one that are for more technical interviews, which will come more in later parts. And then we'll have a behavioral, non-technical framework that we'll go over. Then we'll actually talk about behavioral interviews. What do they look for? What do they look like? And how would I answer some questions? I just pulled 3 random questions from a site, and I'm going to go over how I would explain them and, what types of feedback maybe I would get. And then at the end, my favorite part is going to be the Q&A. So any questions that you guys have on anything that we had covered right before that point, or if there's something I didn't cover and you want me to go more in depth in, I want to spend as much time answering the questions that you guys have. And so I'll leave about 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little more, to answer those questions. And yeah, that's basically our plan for today. So it's going to be, I think that for all of the other, I'm going to go back here. All of the other parts, we're definitely going to go up to the 2-hour mark because there's just a lot more content. I mean, we could all spend all day talking about linked lists, right? There's a lot to go over. There's a lot of technical minutia there. I think part 1 is going to be the only one that might be about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So all the other ones will be chock full. I'm going to take a sip of my water. So this will be exciting. I'm super excited. This is something I've always wanted to do for a while now. I just recently gotten out of college. I'm a new grad starting my first big girl job. I'll talk more about that later. And after all of the years of interviewing, all of the pain and the tears and the blood and the sweat, I have collected all of that information and have brain dumped it into this slide. And so hopefully everything that I learned, you are going to get this information. It's going to be a one-stop shop. So water break. Alrighty. Yes, me too. Yes, if there are any new grads, anyone who just started their jobs or anyone recently, please post some in the chat. I'd love to hear it. That could be a whole other track, talking about new grads adjusting to your new job and all of the stuff that come along with that. That could be a whole other conversation, but we're not going to go there. So, all right, let's cover the disclaimers. This is going to be kind of the more boring parts of this, but I just want to cover it so that you know what to expect and that you don't come in with an expectation of me covering something that I am not. So first things first, I am not the source of truth. I am just a former student who did a ton of interviews, and I've been around the block a few times interviewing a lot of companies, and I'm just going to share with you what I know. I don't think that I know everything. I've never been a recruiter. I've never been on the opposite side of it. So there might be some people, whether it's on the web or on YouTube, who might have that knowledge. And obviously, everything that I'm going to say may not be, there might be other things that you can learn from, but just know I am not the person. As much as I like to think I know everything, I don't. So just keep that in mind. Oh, you received 2 offers. Congratulations. Congratulations. Graduating in 2023. That's so exciting. Now that I am not a student anymore, listening to people who are about to graduate and getting offers is just the most exciting thing, because you've been in college or university or whatnot for so long, and now you've reached this milestone where your professional career is about to be And that is so exciting. Congratulations. All right, back to the disclaimers. For parts 2, 3, and 4, so this won't be applicable to part 1. There's no coding today, but the coding will be in Python. I understand that for the most part, you can choose the language that you want. I know some people are more comfortable maybe with Java or, JavaScript or what have you, but all of the examples that I will be providing will be in Python, just because that's the language I will choose. But no, anything that we do, you can, apply it to the language of your choice. When we get to parts 2, 3, and 4, I will create a GitHub repo that will have all of the questions that we go through, all of the answers, all of the code. Like I said, there won't be any of that in part 1 because there is no code, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up there. In terms of my focus, so my focus is software engineering and product and program management. I understand that there are some students here who maybe are going into data engineering or UI or UX developers, or maybe going into consulting or more IT focused. While I think that there are bits and pieces of this that you might be able to benefit from, just note that the tips that I'm providing are for the hackers and those who want to go into PM. So just giving you a heads up. Deborah, that's a good one. Like I said, I'm not going to be covering that in depth. Like I said, I think part 1 is probably going to be the only universal one, because a lot of these are just recruiter tips and just like behavioral interviews. So for that dev one, that one I won't be covering, but it's really only going to be software engineering and product management, because that's all I know. I don't want to be, as much as I could maybe cover things on data engineering or data science, I don't want to be speaking about something that I'm not knowledgeable about. US based. So I'm from the US. I'm currently in the US. I am fully aware and understand that the process that I'm going to describe is certainly going to be complicated if you are not in the US or if you are an international student. So what I'm speaking is not only US based, that process might be the same in a different country. It's more so if you're not from the US and then you're applying to a job in the US, or vice versa. If you're cross country, basically. I will try my best to answer those questions, but just note that is the lens that I'm coming off of, and you are welcome in the comments. I will not be sharing NDA content from company interviews. Now, I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of background on what questions interviewers ask, and I will, to the best of my knowledge, share that with you, but I don't want to get sued. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want anything to happen, anyone to be coming after me for sharing things that should not be shared. And so just know I'm going to be following the rules. Like I said, to the best of my ability, I will try to share interviews that have come up and that I've seen, but I will not be saying, oh, here's Google's like 3 interview questions that are going to be coming up. Make sure you prepare for those. I'm going to stray away from that because I don't want to get in trouble. If you want to go down that path, you can go down that path, but that's not for me. How do I smoothly get into MLH prep? So when you say, if you can expand on that a little bit more, when you say MLH prep, do you mean for the MLH fellowship, or do you mean, if you can just elaborate on that comment, I'd love to answer it. While you're doing that, I'm going to continue. So this is kind of going back to that first bullet point. My thoughts only. I'm not speaking on behalf for any external company or organization. So, okay. Yeah, the MLH fellowship. So I believe that there is a talk that's happening for, I see, the fellowship prep. Okay, I see. Give me a second. I believe that we have a talk coming up. So that's not going to be covered in this particular stream. I believe we have a stream that will be covering that information. Yes, we do. It's going to be on the 14th, which I believe is a Wednesday. So Wednesday, there is going to be a stream that covers MLH, the fellowship, and getting into that. I won't be covering the details of that today, but if you still want to listen, I'd love to have you. But Wednesday's talk on MLH fellowships is an info session. That might be your best bet. So yes, my thoughts only, not speaking on behalf of anyone. This is coming from the mouth of governess. All right, those are all the disclaimers. Just wanted to cover my bases so I don't get in trouble later. Let us get started. So, all right, here's the juicy stuff. Here's the background. Ooh, you're selected for the fellowship this fall. Congratulations. One thing I will say, I applied to the fellowship twice and I didn't get in. I have applied to the MLH fellowship twice. I think I applied in 2021. I applied for 2021 when they just opened it up because of COVID. and I got to the final round, didn't get it. And then I had applied again for 2022, and I didn't even get past the first round. They literally like rejected me right out. And they do a good job, MLH. They do a good job of giving you feedback on why you didn't get it, and it made sense. But yeah. All right. So here is this. This actually took me the most amount of time to make based on all the slides that I have. These I combined a list of all the interviews that I have done, all the offers I have received, and then all the offers that I have received and the ones that I actually had taken. We're going to go through, I know it's a lot. We're going to go through all of it. But let's back up a little bit and give a little bit about who I am. So hello, my name is Governess. I recently graduated from the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities. I did not study computer science. I studied industrial and systems engineering, which if you don't, or ISYE for short. If you don't know what that is, it is denoted as the business engineering major, which basically means it covers a lot of supply chain optimization, project and product management, a lot of statistics-based works, basically like making predictions based on the information you have and using that to drive business decisions. So that was the major that I had. I didn't even receive the mail. Yeah, I applied 4 times. I know. I don't know why. I keep applying for the fellowships, and like I don't know. Like I said, there's an info talk that talks more about it. I didn't get it, so I can't really say much about it. And so I feel I wanted to give this talk, and I brought it up kind of at the beginning because I have been through the interview process front and back for every type of internship imaginable. I have done internships before I got into college. I did internships after I got into college. I did internships during the summer, fall, and spring of my college years. And I've done it at as you see, very, very large companies. I've done it at startups. I've done it at unicorns. I've done fellowships, research-based and non-research-based. And so I've been around the block. And so with all of those experiences, I really wanted to come together and say, hey, for those students who are coming into this same pipeline, here is what you should know. Here is what I wish I would have done. And so one thing to note is that I graduated in 5 years. So I had an extra year. And so I'll look at all of these and note that, there's an extra year added to that. Can you add some extra year added to that? Can you drop your Twitter or LinkedIn? I can do that at the end. I will share my LinkedIn because I do want, if there are any like questions or follow-ups to this and you want to ask, we can certainly do that. I will add that at the very, very end. So stay tuned. That was the plan. And so I have, based on all of those experiences, I really wanted to share what worked and what didn't for me. And so I'm going to start on the accepted list and kind of go through my journey. So as I mentioned, I came in not as a computer science major. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career and what I wanted. I just knew that working in tech seemed to be the thing that people did in order to make money. That's the lens that I came in with. And so with that, after I graduated high school, I had my first internship at a science museum. It was the Science Museum of Minnesota, and it was a STEM-based teaching program. So I taught 3rd through 5th graders how to learn about like chemistry and biology through a lot of kid-based programs, making slime and how that relates to chemistry. And we will talk about like things like biology and what was it, like earth science. And so basically I was essentially just an intern that helped in teaching students about STEM and getting them into it. May I know how MLAs can help us in getting job opportunities? Ooh, that's a really good question. And so I will say that MLH helps in getting opportunities. One, because you have the network of students available. So all of this, everyone in MLH is usually, most people are computer science students and they want to get a job just like you. And so you have this network of people who are sharing opportunities. You have ways like this, like the Global Hack Week is a fantastic opportunity because it's building your resume. It's getting you more involved in technical projects, and it's allowing you to be a better coder. You're here. And so this track is going to teach you how to prepare for that. Yeah, professional experience. And so I would say the fellowship is probably the best way to prepare you for that. Mainly because the fellowship allows you to get actual experience on your resume, whether or not you're more of a beginner or a more advanced way. Like I said, that Wednesday info session is going to be the best way to do that. And so how can we do that? Can you elaborate that a little? When you say also how can we do that, can you elaborate that more in the comments? contributing the project that people use every day. And so the MLH fellowship has a what was it, open source based fellowship that allows you to contribute to those projects. And there are a lot of other things that you can do in order to get that. We might cover some of those opportunities later on. And so, like I said, let me backtrack a bit. This is not an MLH fellowship talk. There's a separate MLH fellowship. And so I'm going to ignore those comments just for the moment so I can continue on. If we have time at the end, I can answer those questions, but I want to stay on track since I haven't done the MLH fellowship. So I don't know what it is. I know what it is, but I haven't done it. So, okay. So I started off at the Science Museum as a incoming freshman. So I had no experience there. And then from there, I had done an intern. I actually forgot to mention this, an internship. It was during my fall semester of college. Yes, my first year of college, I had done an internship, and that was web development. And then from there, I had done something called an REU, which I'm going to type in the chat, just so that you guys know what that is. It's a research experience for undergraduates. A lot of big schools. So I went to the University of Minnesota. We had a lot of programs like this that allowed you to get into research earlier on, and it paid you to do so. And you can do that. I think pretty much every big public university has an RAU. Yeah, freshman. Yeah, people say that you can't get internships as freshmen. That is very untrue. I just want to throw that out there. It's definitely more difficult, and I think I was in a case where I had some technical experience where I could make that work, but don't ever think that, oh, I'm a freshman or oh, I'm a sophomore, I have to wait until junior year to get an internship. Not true. And have you been into Android development? I had one set of Android development. It was through a program called CodePath, which if you haven't looked at it, I highly recommend it. CodePath was a program that is almost like a way for you to prepare for technical interviews and also just get more exposed to different projects. I was part of a summer program that taught us how to write an app using Android. And so I haven't had an internship based on that, but I have dabbled in Android, not iOS. I have not, even though I have a MacBook in front of me, but I haven't coded in iOS. So, okay, so then I had done that REU, and that was that was just a way for me to learn more about research at the time. I didn't really know what I wanted, if I wanted to go into industry or if I wanted to go into academia. And so this REU was a way to teach me about that. And so with that, that research project was learning how to use virtual reality in order to solve problems related to interior design and architecture. So it was a really cool project. I got to build in Blueprint, which was on, Unreal Engine, I believe, since we were using VR. And so from that project, I was able to get a paper published. Yes, freshman. Also, one other thing, I got a paper published as a freshman. Don't ever let your age or where you are stop you from doing the things that you want to do, because as long as I think a lot of it comes to what resources are available at your school, but however it works, you can still do it. So based on all of those background, I was able to finally say, okay, I'm going to start actually working in industry. And so my first internship, big internship, was at Microsoft. I was part of their Explore program, which was their way to get involved in software engineering and product management. And from there, I was there for 2 summers. As you see, I'm kind of going in a snake kind of up here. So it starts off here in science, and then I go down, right, down. I didn't really format this very well. So I was at Microsoft for 2 years. I first worked on their Visual Studio IDE team and kind of building front-end compilers. And then second year, I worked on their Microsoft Windows, what was it called? The Windows enablement team, essentially. So kind of the actual little kernel on the left-hand side and all the features that came with that. I then transitioned to an internship at Palantir. So that was a big 180 from kind of working big tech industry to now working at the time it was a unicorn. Now it's public, as you might know. And I got to work in the US government team. So working with a lot of federal agencies. From there, I had done another RU, and then I'm going to kind of fly by the rest of these. And then I worked at a startup, Bubble, as an intern, as a startup engineering, software engineering intern for a while. And from there, I graduated. So after Bubble, I graduated college. And then I had time between my full-time job, which started in September. I just started a few weeks ago, and when I graduated. So I had a full summer, and a lot of people would say go traveling and go do those things. And now that I have not done that, I did not go traveling. I wish I would have gone traveling. But if I didn't go traveling, I wouldn't be here to tell you that I did do an internship right after college. And so there are some companies that allow you to get internships even after you graduate. And so I did a program called Coding It Forward, which paired me with a government agency to do projects with them. And I worked with the IRS. And now I'm with MLH. I am a coach here to support you guys. And then now I work full time at Palantir. So that's kind of my story, kind of where I came from. On the far left are all of the interviews that I have done and either dropped out of or I failed. And notice how big that left column is in comparison to everything else on the right. Yeah, it was a lot of people say that you need oh no, let me rephrase. You will experience a lot more failures in the interviewing process than you will successes, but that's what makes the successes so much more sweet because you've been beaten, you've fallen down so many times, and the important part is to come back up. So some of the horror stories, and I want to go into some of the horror stories I've had from these companies, is I think it was at Meta. They had asked me a question. What was it? They had asked me a question like related to a data structure that I didn't know. Like I just flat out didn't know what it was, and I was like struggling through it. And then the interview had just ended, and then like I think a few days later they were like, "Yep, you're going to be rejected." And so sometimes interviews don't go very well. Sometimes you land on your butt and you kind of have to get up there. And so just know that. But because of that, I was able to experience all of these different companies, and now I can kind of share those stories. And then on the middle are the offers that I did receive, but I chose not to take for reasons, because I picked the ones on the right. And so I had offers from like Salesforce and Twitter and JP Morgan and Coinbase. So that's my kind of discography, as you might say, in my place in tech. Hopefully that like at least shows some evidence that like, hey, I've done some interviews, I've been around the block, and this is kind of my collection of all the things I've learned. So enough about me. I just wanted to spend some time covering that. And so now I'm gonna take a water break. I see a question. You practice DSA a lot, right? Yes, I mean, you're gonna have to get interviews at a lot of these places. You certainly have to be good at it. You have to understand the interviewing system and how it works, and that's kind of why we're here. So I can teach you that system, and you can get your job. All right. So now let's cover the types of programs, the types of internships that you might be able to get. So the first one is summer internship. So this is very, a very traditional software engineering or product management internship. In terms of the recruiting season, that is right now. The biggest mistake that I know a lot of students make is they wait too long to start looking for internships. While you can get an internship in January, in February, or in March, usually the options that you have are pretty low because a lot of the big companies have already started recruiting. Like I know places that have already started recruiting in the summer. Like some of the like finance firms like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, they kind of start their interview process much, much earlier. And so if you're here, you're at a good point because this is the time to really start recruiting and to start applying if you want to get some of the bigger internships. Yeah, any suggestions for learning DSA? We're going to cover that. We're going to cover that at length in parts 2 and 3, but some of them are already putting in the comments. Leak Code is a really good one. Algo Expert is a good one. That one's been growing a lot. Was Hacker Earth is a good one, or Hacker Rank as well. And so there are a lot of places where you can be practicing DSA. Have you done competitive programming? No, I have not done competitive programming. It was something that I was planning on doing. I wanted to do it, but I think I didn't learn about it until I was like a junior in college. And so it took a little while. And by that point, I was already getting ready for my full-time job. So it's something I wish I would have done, but that's okay. All right. So then we have our summer internships, and then you have something that's called a co-op. And so I want to cover what a co-op is. That's essentially a way for you to do an internship during the school year. And so your school might have a specific program for that where, okay, maybe for your major, you can do an internship during the fall or the spring in lieu of doing classes. So instead of classes, you can take an internship. You can usually do that for credit, or you can do that for, sometimes they'll pay you along the way, but it really depends. So that's basically what that is. You did open source. Yes, I did do open source, not as much as I wish I would have done. I think open source, that could be a whole other topic, is something that people tend to be afraid of getting into because you don't really know how to start, right? You kind of like, everyone says, "Oh, do open source. It's a really great way to get experience," and then you jump into it, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, how do I even contribute? How do I even get the tech set up so I can access everything that the people are using in order to build the product on GitHub?" And so I have done open source, but it is very, if you love it, but it definitely is challenging to get into it. Yeah, very much imposter syndrome, because once you start doing it for a while, you kind of understand where to go, but it's hard because everyone, you're just a student or maybe a full-timer, and you don't know what you can contribute. You don't have a track record, and you're just some rando contributing to code. I would say do not be afraid of open source. Maybe at the end, during the Q&A, we can cover some of those, like, how do I get into it? What are the avenues? But I'm going to proceed. So then you have fellowships. So they are basically internships, but instead of traditionally working at a company, they tend to have a third-party organization that kind of organizes that summer event for you. I see that question. I'm going to get back to it in a second. So some of these things, some of you guys have already talked about. The MLH fellowship, that is a fellowship. You have REUs, which is a fellowship for research, and then things like I've done, like Coding It Forward, which is a organization that matches you to a company to work for. And then finally, we have programs that are specific to a certain year or demographic. And so one thing I mentioned, I did Microsoft Explore. That was specifically for first and second year students. And so I always emphasize, if you're a freshman or a sophomore, find those opportunities, because they know that you haven't taken a ton of upper division courses yet, and they cater their internship experience to you. And so let me go back to that list so I can go through that. Microsoft has one, Palantir has one, I think it's called Palantir Path. Google Step, or I think they renamed it or something. It's like Google Step is what it used to be called, I think. What else? Meta has their, like, Facebook University has one. Like, pretty much any bigger company has programs for first or second year students. Can name some for second year students. Yeah. And so I kind of listed some of them. So Microsoft, Meta, Google, I believe I think Amazon has like a first year. I don't know if Amazon has a second year. Palantir has one, and what was it? Duolingo, I think, has one as well. I think Pinterest has like a program for first years. I have to look up. We can, at the end, I can like do a Google search, and we can find. Honestly, we can do a Google search and kind of find all of the programs. Let me write that down just so that here we go. Let me write that down just so that when we get to the end, we can just do a big search of all the first and second year programs. But yeah, there are a ton of programs that you can apply for. And so don't ever think that your year holds you back. So let me write that down. First and second year program. Cool. Alrighty. And then there are some programs that are specifically for underrepresented students, and etc. So those are kind of the big categories of internships or fellowships that you can do while you're a student. Okay, going back to the question. I have an internship starting next week that I want to add to my resume. Should I mention it in applications even though I haven't started, since you said applying now? Yes, I would say add it to your resume. What I have done in the past is I would add it to my resume basically saying, hey, here is the, like on my experience, I would say like incoming, like if I'm at Microsoft and I'm on the side as my role, I would say incoming software engineering intern, and then you can list what date you're supposed to start. And then during your applications, you can say, hey, I'm going to be working here, just to kind of give yourself a bit more clout, add a bit more reputation to what you're doing. So to answer your question, yes, 100% you should mention that you have an internship. That might also just help because, they know that you're on demand. So answer is yes. Can you share the list? I will share the list at the end because we just want to keep on rolling. I kind of mentioned a few of them. I'll type it in the chat. This won't be a full list. I will type in the chat what I have, and then at the end, we'll kind of go through all the big ones. So the companies that have first and second year programs, you want to look into Microsoft, you want to look into Meta, Google. I believe Amazon has one. Duolingo has one. I believe Pinterest has one. I don't think VMware has one. Okay, so these are the ones that like I know for sure have one. At the end, we can do a big search and see what other ones I've missed because there's a lot of them. So hopefully that gets you started. Just type in like Microsoft undergrad, like under like first or second year program, and it'll show up as Microsoft Explorer. All right, now let's get into the meat and bones, the types of interviews that you might encounter. So the first thing is a technical assessment. So this might be a standalone, or it might be something that comes in addition to the interview. And so these are typically held on third-party platforms, and you're usually not talking to a person. Usually it'll just tell you the problem, and it'll say, okay, write a program that reverses a string, and it'll give you an IDE for you to work on, and you solve the problem and you submit it. And what happens is that there are internal tests that go on behind the scenes, and essentially what you'll do is they'll look at your code and there'll be tests like saying, okay, first off, does the code work? Does it run? That'll be one single test, but there'll also be things in terms of efficiency. Does it run, in X time? Does it work for these specific use cases? And so it's kind of a way to avoid having to meet in person because you write it on this IDE. There are a lot of different platforms that do this. Some of the more familiar ones are Byteboard, CodeSignal, Codility, HireVue, things like those are kind of like those technical assessment based ones. One note, if you've been a Lyft intern, you amaze me. I know this is kind of a random aside, but Lyft is like the only company that I applied for every single year. I think almost every year of my college experience, and I've never gotten past the Byteboard challenge. Byteboard is so, I don't know what it is. I don't know how they write their interview. I think I'm a pretty good coder, but I struggle with Lyft's interviews. I don't know how people do it. And so I see people who announce I'm working at Lyft, and that's when I look at them and I know, yeah, you're really good at what you do because I can't do it. That's just an aside. Lyft's their interview process is, I haven't gotten very far, and that's probably the only one that I'm looking at. Like, maybe one day. All right. Then you have your traditional coding interview. So this is kind of what everyone expects coming into interviewing for a software engineering position. So they do introductions, and then they say, hey, here's a problem, implement the solution with code. We're going to cover that process more in detail in part 2. But I just wanted to tell you that's an interview that might come up. Then you have learning interviews. This may come up on certain companies, but it will depend on the company. It usually is a final round interview. So usually at the end, they'll have 2 or 3 interviews you have to do, sometimes back to back. This is kind of one of those where they're saying, hey, here's a new software technology that maybe you haven't touched before. How fast can you learn and apply it? So in contrast to a coding interview, which is going to have more of seeing, okay, do you have the skills to solve this type of problem? A learning interview is going to be looking more at, given that you've never looked at this technology before, can you pick up on it? Can you ask the right questions? And can you use it even though you had very little time? So usually you don't have to prep for learning interviews other than just, being good at reading and asking questions and understanding what you're trying to do. So I've seen those interviews a few times. Cultural and behavioral interviews, that is what we're going to be talking about today. So, when they're asking you questions, tell me about yourself. The question we all hate, the tell me about yourself, that little pitch you have to give, as well as questions, tell me about a time you've worked in a team. Those types of questions, or maybe it's asking, what's your work style? So those are the more cultural and behavioral based interviews. And I see a question in the chat. Will LeetCode help for technical assessment interviews? Yes. And the reason that LeetCode will help, because I think LeetCode is probably a closer example to what a technical assessment interview is, because on LeetCode, you work on a problem, and then and when you click submit, LeetCode will actually check to see, it'll run those tests in the background. So I would say, yes, LeetCode is a very good way. I see the next comment. Having so many interviews sounds intimidating. Yes, I fully agree. As someone who has just graduated and gone through that process myself, there are so many different types of interviews. They really run you through the ringer when it comes to getting the job. I don't know why getting a job. I don't know why it has to be so hard getting a job, especially with all the interviews, especially given like controversy of, does the interview actually correlate to the work that you're doing on the job? That is, yeah, I see that comment. I will get back to that in a second. But yeah, getting interviews are a lot, and so the best way to overcome that is knowledge. Once you're knowledgeable about how the process works, you will become so much more comfortable in navigating it. Because the biggest fear, not is other than not having enough skill, is the ambiguity. It's not knowing what to expect in an interview, and hopefully things like this or online resources help you be more prepared. And so I'm going to get to that question at the end of this slide. I see that right there. Not question, not really a question, but I'll get to that comment. Then you have topic specific interviews. And so this is really going to, this is like a niche category. It really depends on the company. So this will be, maybe in the position that you're applying for, they ask for a very specific skill. And so maybe they want to see, are you good with statistics and math? Or do you know how to apply machine learning and AI? Those are usually the categories. There might be a few more. But yeah, they might ask you to do a question that asks for your knowledge on the topic. So that might be more book smart, have you been paying attention in class type of things, as opposed to coding it on an IDE. And then finally, we have the product or scenario based, or like these system interviews. And so this is more on the lines of, we want you to build an app that does this. Walk through all of the steps and considerations and, the design, the UI, kind of all the non-technical parts that come with building a product. Go. So that's what so if you intend to be applying for like a product manager intern or a full-time role, that is typically the types of questions you'll get. But in an interview, you might get a little taste of everything. Maybe for an interview, you might only get traditional coding problems. Maybe they'll give you a technical assessment, and then you have a coding interview, and then you have a product-based interview. And so there are many ways that it can go. I just wanted you all to get exposed to hear all the interviews that I've encountered during my time as a student. All right, so I see the comment there. I'm just going to read it for a second, and then I'm going to respond. Yeah. So the comment essentially saying like making online connections with strangers, especially like just like, yeah, networking is hard. I mean, networking is hard in general. That could be its own separate talk on how you can network with people. I think it really just comes with practice and building your online persona and being comfortable with that. It's hard, and it really also, you have to keep in touch with them. You can't just say, "Oh, hi," and talk once and then never talk again and expect to have that network. Networking and building a community takes work, and it takes showing up, and it takes like time. And so that is a real problem, and really the only solution I have for that is just showing up and constantly being there. Okay, how many rounds of interview for the intern position? Good question. So we're actually going to cover that. I think that's in the next slide. Yes. Okay. So to answer your question, so the interview flow, the easiest answer to that is it's going to depend on the company. But the flow, as I've seen it, is usually as such. So you start with applying to the company, of course. I would say most of the time, but not always, you'll have something that's called a recruiter interview. So this is the time where you will meet with the recruiter of that has reached out to you or that you've applied through, and they're going to sit down and talk to you about and we're going to cover what a recruiter interview is in a second. But essentially, they're just going to be checking to see, do you meet the criteria of the job that you're applying for? And so it's usually very low key. Usually it's about 30 minutes, just checking to see, are you a student? Are you available during a certain time of the year type of thing? Are you open to relocation? So it's less of an interview and more of a getting you acclimated into the role, what it is, and making sure you meet expectations. Then you have the technical assessment, which once again, that will depend. But most of the time they'll say, okay, you passed the recruiter interview, we'll send you a technical assessment. That is usually as a weed out method, unfortunately, mainly because there's so many people applying to an intern position that you can't have interviews face to face with everybody. And so how they remedy that is to send you a technical assessment so that you can actually, so you can still prove that you can code. And then, those who have passed with a certain percentage, then they go on to actually interview, and then they reject the rest. So that leads to the technical interviews. You typically you have a technical interview just to say, okay, sometimes it might be a phone interview too. It might be phone, might be in person, might be like pair programming, depends on the company. And then after you completed that, sometimes if you complete the technical interview, that might be it. Maybe that'll be the end of the round. Some companies take it a step forward and then they have what's called an on-site interview or a final interview. So that is when you actually have to fly out to the company's headquarters, and you get to really be immersed in the culture, and you have about 2 to 3 interviews that day. Some people in like the finance world, they call this a super day, where basically you have interviews throughout the entire day. Like sometimes some people have like 4 to 5 to 6 interviews. And then after that process, if you've gone through all of that, then you get your decision on whether or not you've gotten accepted or you've been rejected. So to answer the question, how many rounds of interviews? It really depends on the company. I would say on average, you should expect an interview with the recruiter so that you understand what's happening. A technical interview or like a phone interview, which is still technical, but it's more like just gauging your skill. And then you might have an on-site interview, which might be broken up into a technical interview, a learning interview, maybe like a product interview, or maybe there's 3 technicals. So I would say around 2 to 5 is the range for an intern. Might be more, might be less. Once again, that will depend on the company. What's the best way to find a job in the US from outside of the country? That's a good question. I would say the online resources will be a good bet here. We're actually going to cover that in the next slide. LinkedIn is a really good resource. Your school's career fair, or just like your school's online like system that allows you to apply to companies, might be a good fit. And then honestly, like finding these communities like this, like MLH, or there's a lot of Facebook groups. I should add that to the slides. There's Facebook groups that you can join that kind of share the interviews, the applications that you can apply to. So I would say online is probably the best way to do it. Particularly LinkedIn and like Facebook groups, and potentially, school resources are the best ways. Okay. I heard from some companies also have a lunch interview where they take you out to lunch to check culture fit. Is that just for full-time positions? No, I've actually had an interview like that. Yes. And so, yeah, that is 100% true. They will take you out to lunch and it'll be like a culture check. It really depends on the company. I've heard a lot of things saying like, oh, they take you out to lunch and they don't tell you that it's an interview, but in reality, it's an interview. My thoughts there are, if you're on site for an interview, I would treat every interaction as an interview. I would, even if they're taking you out to lunch and it seems casual, I would still have a professional persona and still expect to say, okay, even though we're not sitting in an interview room, you're still being checked on your demeanor. And, it's a process, and it's very anxiety inducing and sometimes very stressful. So I understand that. But yeah, I would say it's not just for full time. I've had it for an internships as well. So yeah, they're there for both. Yep, they'll pay for food. If you are going on site, I would not expect you to pay anything. If they fly you out to interview there, like I had an on site when before I interned for Microsoft, they paid for the flight, they paid for the hotel, they paid for the food, they gave me like a stipend for the day. So yeah, if they expect you to take the time to go on site, they should not have you paying for anything. Is there an average number of interviews you have to do for one job? I would say 2 to 5. I would say average 3. If I were to pick a number, I would probably say 3 interviews, but the range can be about 2 to 5 depending on what you're applying for. Is it full-time or is it an internship? The difficulty of the role you're applying to, how big the company is. So if you're applying to something like Microsoft or Google, they might have a little bit more interviews than, maybe a smaller startup, just because of their interview process. So 3, I would say on average, 2 to 5 as a range. Alrighty, let us proceed. So applying to the company. So we're going to go through that flow yep, of course. So this flow, so you'll see the things that are in bold. That is what we're going to be covering today. And so the technical assessment, technical interviews, and on-site, that will be in parts 2, 3, and 4. Today, I just want to cover the non-technical and behavioral parts. So first things first is applying to the company. Now, we could spend a whole other 3 hours talking about your resume and your LinkedIn and getting those up to snuff. If people are interested in that in the Q&A section, maybe we can delve into deep dive, but this is not going to be a how to prepare your resume, how to prepare your LinkedIn type of chat. I really want to focus just on the interviews. And so what I will say is just making sure your resume and LinkedIn are up to date. I always tend to do, when I was a student, I would always have like I guess some tips that I'll give now that we're on it is that I would always like monthly check in on my resume, make sure I'm up to date all of the applications and all the roles that I've had, any skills that I've earned, any like awards or leadership positions. I'd always try to keep that up to date. I would have multiple copies of your resume. So maybe you have a resume that's specific to software engineering, but maybe you have a different resume for, you know, an on-campus job or for data engineering. So having different copies of your resume are very important. And then I would recommend, for if your school has a career center, using that, leveraging that the best you can, having somebody review your resume, making sure that it's in the best shape it can be, getting the right format. LinkedIn's a really good resource for that. Because a lot of people post like templates of resumes that you can use, and so I would highly recommend that. And then LinkedIn, please have a LinkedIn account. That is, if there's one thing to take away from this slide, I mean, there's a lot. Have a LinkedIn account. Some people ask, is LinkedIn helpful? Is LinkedIn useful? Absolutely. I got my internship from Microsoft via LinkedIn. Like, I had my LinkedIn account set up, and then a recruiter reached out to me and they were like, hey, we really like your profile. We think that you'd be a really good fit for this company. And for the most part, they might be doing that to a lot of people. But because of them reaching out, that's how I wasn't even going to apply to that company. But they reached out to me. And because of that, I applied and I got in and I interned there for 2 summers. So please make sure your LinkedIn's up to date. Create an account. If you don't know how to create an account and you want to know, maybe in Q&A we can cover it, but just making sure that, you know, you have a photo, you have your summary, you have your experiences, your skills, just making sure that it's up to date. And then as you're updating your resume, make sure your LinkedIn are up to snuff as well. Some people ask me, is your resume and your LinkedIn the same thing? Do you want the same content on both? I would say generally, yes. One way that I describe it is that your resume is kind of a snapshot, a 1-page snapshot. Note that I said 1 page. Please don't have your resume be. Some people say, oh, 2 pages is fine. No, just have it 1 page. They're not going to look at it if it's more than 1 page. Your resume is going to be a 1-page snapshot, so you can't elaborate in detail about everything you've done. While your LinkedIn, you can add as much detail as you want, and it's treated as your own personal website, honestly. You can link your projects. So if you're hacking right now and you're building something, you can link it to your LinkedIn page, and then you can share that. Make sure, should have added, make sure you have a GitHub site where you're saving all of your work. So yeah, these are kind of, and when it comes to applying to a company, how you brand yourself and your marketing is very important. I think one thing that we tend to get the mistake of is, oh, I'm a great engineer, I'm a great student, I get really, really good grades, and I built all of these technical products. But if you don't know how to market yourself and show the other recruiters that you're a good student and that you're good at coding, you're never going to get the job. The job is just as much marketing and branding as it is technical skill. You'll learn that over time. Preparing your pitch. So this is, you know, when they say, tell me about yourself or introduce yourself. And that's usually, oh, I forgot that. I forgot the closing parentheses. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, that's so sad. Okay. And I see that question on cover letter. I will cover that in a second. So yeah, preparing your pitch, making sure that, you know, you have a 1-minute pitch that says, hi, I'm Governor Simpson. I graduated from the University of Minnesota. I have experiences in software engineering space based on these internships. I'm looking for X position that serves me Y. I'd love to learn more about yourself and the positions you provide. Something like that. Just have a really strong, succinct, like 30-second pitch that sells who you are and what you want. This won't just be in career fairs. In these behavioral interviews, they might ask that as well. So making sure that you come prepared and not being on the fly. I see the question in the chat that says, okay, yeah. Even better. Yeah, the next question even cover what I was gonna say. So the first one was, how do we write a good cover letter? And then the second one is, should we even bother with cover letters? Ooh, that's a spicy one. This is going to be something that people are going to give you differing opinions on. So this is my personal opinion based on all the interviews that I have done. I don't think it's very helpful. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink. I'm just going to let that sit in for a minute. I don't think you really need a cover letter. The only exception is if they ask you for a cover letter. There are some internship or full-time positions that are like, you need to have a cover letter to apply. Those are the situations that I have a cover letter. Otherwise, I tend not to have one. I understand the mindset of, oh, you want to be above and beyond, you want to stand out from the other applicants. And so people think that a cover letter is a good way to do that, which makes sense, right? You're putting all the time and effort into writing a cover letter, you're elaborating on your experiences in your resume, you're making it look good. It seems like a really good idea. And it probably was for a time. I think now that there are so many people applying to internships, recruiters aren't reading the cover letters. There really aren't. Some of them might. I don't want to use a blanket statement. There are some that might read them, but from my experiences, usually the cover, like, they're spending less than 6 seconds on your resume. Do you think they're going to be sitting and do you think they're going to be sitting and reading your entire cover letter? Chances are that's probably not the case. While I think that if you have the time and you have the energy and you really want to show that you are a star student, it doesn't hurt you. I will say that it will not hurt you to have a cover letter. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh no, never write a cover letter. But if you're really figuring out where to allocate your time and your resources and your efforts, I will say more often than not, it's not necessary. Yes, yeah. So then I've seen companies that specifically ask for it. Yep. So I would say if the company asks for it, then obviously, of course, do it. But if they don't, I don't think it's truly necessary. My personal opinion. You'll have people who tell you the opposite, but I don't think for any of the companies. Let me go back here and we'll actually cover this. Based on the companies, let's start from the offers. Based on the offers I've gotten, which ones have I wrote a cover letter for? Not for Thomson Reuters, not for Salesforce, not for Twitter, not for JP Morgan, not for Coinbase, not for Microsoft, not for Palantir, not for Bubble. We did have the fellowships are a little different. So fellowships, I did have to write a cover letter for that because it was a more selective process. So like NSF, Coding It Forward, MLA, like become a coach, you kind of have to write a little bit more. But look at all the ones I just said. Yeah, pretty much every Salesforce, Twitter, when I applied to Google, I didn't have a cover letter. When I applied to Meta, DeepMind, God, which one of these actually did I write a cover letter for? I don't think I wrote a cover letter for. I think the only one I wrote a cover letter for was for this science museum one. And the only reason I wrote a cover letter for that was because I was a high school student and I didn't have any experience. And so I was just trying to spread my net as wide as possible and show them that I really wanted the job and that I could do it better than, the college. That was my competition. But for every one of these roles, I didn't have a cover letter and they didn't ask me for a cover letter. So to answer the question in short, you don't need one. Oh, go back. You don't need one, but you can have one if you want. If you have the time. And then that's another thing is I would have separate cover letters. So if you do choose to make cover letters, maybe the setup that I would have is kind of like setting up for letters. So, writing your name, who you're writing it to, the date, the position. Then the first paragraph, what you'll do is you'll write down, hey, a little summary on yourself. I think I am equipped for this position for X, Y, and Z reasons. Then the next 3 paragraphs will be elaborating on that. So if I said, I think you should pick me for the Microsoft Suite internship because I know C# and I know C# is a valuable skill. And then the next paragraph, I would write down, here are the experiences that I have used C# in to prove my claim that I'm really good at C#. And I would do that for each of the claims I made. So it's kind of like writing an essay. You write what you're going to say, you expand on those points, and then at the end you say, hey, feel free to reach out. Thank you for looking at my application. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. So that's, if I were to write a cover letter, that's how I'd format it. We're an hour in and I don't even know if we're halfway through these slides. So yeah, when I said that, yeah, of course. Yep. And yep, keep the questions coming. This has been very useful. There's a lot of questions and nuances here. So yeah, we're an hour in and I think we've barely crossed that. Let me double check. I think we've crossed the halfway point. Yeah, we just barely. So like I said, there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of stuff that I can cover. And so we're going to keep rolling. So we covered resume and LinkedIn. We've covered your pitch. Now, the avenues of which to apply. So I kind of answered that question above when you asked, where can we apply? And that was kind of like out-of-state students, but this is kind of applies everywhere. So if you guys probably heard it, I only just got home, Gladys. Yeah, like I said, yeah, we are taking I thought that we'd finish in like an hour and a half. That's probably not the case. We are up and running. And then one thing I will do is I do want to share the slide deck. And so either in the Discord, or maybe maybe I'll link it in a comment at the end. I will share this PowerPoint. So if you want to refer to some of this information later, feel free to do so. So just know if you missed it, or if you just want to look back on it, you will have this resource. Avenues to apply. Handshake is very popular in a lot of schools. I think my school just transitioned to Handshake, and so it's basically a platform where companies can post their applications and their roles available, and then you apply, and then they send that to the company. And so it's basically a LinkedIn. It's basically another LinkedIn, but it's for schools specifically. So that's one way that you can do it. I love as you might know, I love LinkedIn. You might have noticed I didn't apply to LinkedIn. I should have, because I feel like I'd be like a LinkedIn like ambassador. I love LinkedIn so much. I highly recommend it for jobs, for networking, for building a brand. I think that LinkedIn works really well for those who are in business and those who are in tech. If you're if you're like a medical student, or someone who does like a bit more research, maybe LinkedIn isn't as helpful. But for like software engineering fields, it's just such a good resource. And so I highly recommend it. Your career fairs are always a good resource. I know that, with COVID, they kind of went away. I don't know how they're coming back. They might be doing hybrid, but career fairs are really good if you want to apply locally. One thing to know, that's a whole other conversation, should you be applying for internships like in your area, or should you be applying to these big tech companies? My advice there is that you never want to sell yourself short, and that you are more capable than you realize. And so I went to school in Minnesota, and as you might imagine, there's not a lot of companies that are going to be recruiting for people from Minnesota. They tend to go to, the Ivy Leagues, the big schools, usually on the coast, or maybe like, bigger HBCUs, which is historically Black colleges and universities. And so I didn't really have a lot of luck when it came to, Microsoft coming to my career fair. That just wasn't something that happened at my school. And that might be the case for some of you, or maybe you don't go to this top tier school and people are networking with you. In that case, it's really important for you to kind of do the work yourself and reaching out. So that's why I advocate for LinkedIn so heavily, is that if people aren't coming to you, you need to make the initiative to show that you're able to actually do this role and reach out to them. So that's one thing I will say there. Of course, if you live in somewhere like California and local to you is like an Amazon, then by means, be all local. But in Minnesota, a lot of the tech companies that we had, I think IBM and Dell and 3M, of course, those are kind of the bigger tech companies that are in my area, which are great. All of those are fantastic companies. But a lot of the FANG companies, a lot of the bigger unicorns and private and like the bigger companies in general, they weren't really accessible to me in my backyard. And despite that, I was still able to get internships and interviews at them because I took the initiative and showed like, hey, on my LinkedIn, you guys are here in the stream. You guys are taking part in these MLH challenges. You're part of the MLH community. So that already puts you leaps and bounds ahead. So I just wanted to give that aside, because I know that for students who maybe don't go to a bigger school, there might be some imposter syndrome of, okay, look at governors telling me about, working at these big companies, but I go to, a smaller school, something like that. I'm right there with you. University of Minnesota, I don't think it's the top 100. I don't know. I think it's like top 150, which sounds really fancy, but when the competition, you're competing against the Harvards and the Yales, it's just a little bit harder. And I can't even imagine like international students having to apply, the competition there. I haven't experienced that, but I really empathize for those, and I really respect those who are in those situations, who are like going cross country trying to apply. That's even harder, and I can't even imagine that. And so I just want to applaud you guys, because that's incredible that you're doing that. Sorry, not related to the presentation. Just wanted to give that aside. All right, so then cold calling and emailing, another interesting topic that we'll cover. Does cold calling and emailing work? And the answer is yes. And I will give 2 examples of that. So the first one was not company related, but I want to cover it. I was an incoming freshman. So I think this was the same time that I was just I was coming into the university, and I really wanted to get involved in research. And so what I done is I reached out to a professor in the CS department, and I wanted to like do I think he was doing research in like recommendations, making recommendation site, some like learning about the algorithms that fuel recommendation site. So what's the algorithm that runs in Netflix that actually allows them to say, hey, you've watched this show, now you can watch these shows. I wanted to do research there, but I wasn't even a freshman. I hadn't taken a single CS class. I didn't know Python. And I reached out to this professor saying, hey, I'm really interested in this role. I'd really love the opportunity to work in your lab. And he said yes. I don't know why. I don't know why he said yes, but he did. And that summer I spent learning Python and I got to work in his lab. And so cold calling, people get nervous about it because it's always, you're putting yourself out there and, are people going to accept that? And that kind of ties into this comment, so many rejections. Yeah, I'm going to go back. Too far. There we go. There are so many rejections here. It's easy to look onto the offers and the accepted and to say, hey, yeah, I'll cover that. How I learned about it. I'll cover that in a second. But it's so easy to look at, what I've done and, the successes that I've had without looking at all of the failures. I told you, I failed the Lyft interview like 3 times. I think I applied to Google twice. I applied to Meta twice. I dropped out of the PlayStation interview. That might be a fun story. I was interviewing with PlayStation and they gave me a problem that I didn't know how to do. And I sat and it was a phone interview and I didn't know how to do it. And I was very nervous and I was scared and I was like, this is just a flop. I was like, I don't know how to code this. And so literally, I think I ended up like just dialing out of that interview and then they sent me a rejection. And so the rejections are real. No matter how many internships or full-time jobs or whatever prestige that you get, it's very real to feel that rejection. And just knowing that the rejections are what teach you where your weak points are and get you to be better. And so as much as I can look at this, rejection pile and say, wow, yeah, I failed a lot. I can also look at my pile and say, okay, I started off from humble beginnings and I've gotten to this point. Okay, and then now I'm going to go back to that story. So how did I learn about the project? Yes. And so how I learned about the project was not anyone reaching out to me. I went to the CS department website on my school. I just wanted to do research. I wanted to get ahead of the game and say, hey, I want to do research in a lab. I thought I wanted to go into academia. Not the case anymore. And I was like, how can I start writing code? And so when I went to the CS department website, they tell you all the different professors, what they study in their labs. And I looked into this professor who did recommendation sites. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. And I applied. So that's how I learned about the project. It wasn't anyone reaching out to me, which is kind of a common theme, is that if you want to find these opportunities, sometimes they'll tell you, but otherwise you really have to do the work and find them yourself. So cold calling, emailing work, I know it's very intimidating. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. I want that to sink in for a moment. The worst thing that they can do is say no. And if they say no, it's not a representation of you or your, it really is that maybe they said no because their lab is full. Maybe they just can't take in another student. Maybe you had all the qualifications, but there's some external force that prevents you from getting what you want in that situation. Or you get ghosted. I guess that's the other option. I think getting ghosted is actually kind of worse than getting rejected because of that ambiguity. But I would say I think there is certainly strategy and skill. You don't want to be reaching out to recruiters saying, hey, give me a job. I've had that a few times on LinkedIn. Well, now that I'm working at Palantir, somebody would reach out to me and say, hey, can you refer me for this job? And I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know you. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about your credentials. We're not part of the same network. And so there's certainly skill in cold calling, and we can cover that at the end if people are interested. But it does work, and I am living proof that it works. All right, I see a comment in the chat. My resume is pretty slim. 3rd-year student, 1 personal project, and 1 leadership experience. Do I have any chance for interviews at those FANG companies? Yes, you do. I don't even need to know about the personal project. I don't need to know about the leadership experience. This is not me being, optimistic, happy-go-lucky, ignoring reality. I genuinely believe that you have a chance for interviews at those FANG companies. What will allow you to do that is, 1, really depending on your personal product. What did you build? How in detail, what languages did you use? Was it a really in-depth personal project? I think personal projects are amazing because one, it shows initiative. You're not doing it for a grade, you're doing it because you love it and that you really cared about whatever you're making. So that already shows you that that you're actually someone who cares about coding. I think there's a difference between students who do super super well in their CS courses but they don't make any personal projects. And one of the issues of that could be, you're a student, you don't have any time to actually code. But no, on the other hand, it's like, if you really love coding, if you want to make it your job, if you want your career to revolve around coding, you really want to, you want to demonstrate to the recruiters that, hey, I want to learn about these skills, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom. So the fact that you have a personal project is already really good. And the fact that you have a leadership experience, which is something I don't cover too much here, but I will say having leadership experience is so good because when you join a company, either as an intern or a full-time person, chances are at the beginning, they'll give you feedback and direction. But over time, if you want to continue getting promotions and getting additional responsibility, to prove that you are someone who's self-sufficient, someone who is capable of, knowing when they need help and knowing how to find those resources. And also, if you want to get into a people management role, that you can work with people. Are you a good person to work with? And so those are really good skills to have. I would say, if anything, because when I applied to Microsoft, I'm trying to think of the experiences that I had. I had done research, but that was essentially it. I'm not even a CS student, and I was able to get those. So the fact, if you're a CS student, you're already you're already betterly equipped for these interviews than I was, because I had to learn data structures and algorithms by myself. Because I didn't have the classes to really teach me that. And so the fact that you, presumably CS student, I don't know if you're actually CS, but if you are, you're already in a really good place. So my answer to that is yes. Obviously, there are a lot of factors outside of what you just told me that might influence that. But like I said, don't let yourself, how do I phrase this? Don't reject yourself. Like, don't let yourself be the person who rejects. There's like a saying. What's the saying? It's like, don't say no to yourself before you even started. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you're gonna try, you have to try. Like I said, the worst case that can happen is you apply to what was it? Isn't it like manga? As I said, comments. I feel like manga is like better, but I guess manga's already like copyright, like trademarked, whatever. But you don't want to reject yourself before they get to reject you. You want to have faith and belief in yourself that you can do it, because that confidence is going to carry over into these roles. Obviously, there's some technical skill that you need to have to really succeed, but it all takes confidence. I heard this somewhere that, there are people who have half the talent and the skill that you have, but they're more accomplished and they're doing more things. They took a chance on themselves, that they're betting on themselves, and they are willing to grow. Yep, yeah. And I'm not saying that you're doing that. Sorry, yeah. I just want to clarify. Not saying that you're doing that. I'm just kind of speaking. I'm just talking, giving life stuff. And so yeah, definitely. You have a chance. That's to answer your question. Then we have someone reaching out to you. So that happened to me, depending on how active you are in social media. Are you marketing yourself? They might reach out to you. And then referrals and word of mouth, which I will be honest, I have not. I will go back to here. I keep going back to the slide. I have not had a referral I think the only place I had a referral was Google. Yeah. Oh, and Meta. And I still didn't get it. I still didn't get it. Those are the only two companies that I had a referral in. I did not have a referral for any of these companies. For Salesforce, Twitter, Coinbase, and Palantir, I did not have a referral. And the two ones that I did have a referral on, I got rejected. So don't fall into the trap of thinking a referral is a be all end all. You still need to prove your skill. Now, I still think referrals are a fantastic idea. I think you need referrals in order to, you don't need it. I think referrals can be helpful in getting your foot in the door in a company that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, but it's not the be all end all. So, okay, that was a lot of talking, but this is a really big part of it. It's applying to the companies. So I just want to cover that. All right. Let's keep it rolling. keep it rolling. The interview framework. All right, so now we're going to start talking about the actual. So we covered a lot of, you know, what types of interviews are available and what you need to know about them. Now we're actually going to start talking about examples and how to do a behavioral and cultural interview. So before we do that, I want to talk about the framework that you should be approaching to do these interviews. So there are two frameworks that we're going to cover in this 4-part series. One of them is technical, which is the umpire method. We're going to cover that part 2. That'll be on Monday, 8 o'clock ET. We're going to cover the umpire method. So if you want to learn how to solve a technical interview with a framework, stick around for that. What we're going to be covering today is for non-technical, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. It's pretty popular, and I endorse it. I think it's fantastic. It is the STAR method. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And also note, this isn't the only framework. There probably are more frameworks you can use. This is the one that I think works the best. So I will also, let me grab that link that I put in there, and I will put it in the chat. If you want to learn more about the STAR method, I will, I'm going to get you this link here so that you can actually access it. Here we go. I'm also going to charge. I need to get a charger. We'll deal with that in a second. Good. While that goes, I'm going to get my charger quick. Plug it in. Here, and here we go. Plug them in here. There we go. All right. So the STAR method is a technique in order to solve interviews, and it basically breaks down the question into 4 different areas. So first things first is, so let's talk about the question. Tell me how you have worked. Tell me about a situation where you worked on a team where there's conflict. So let's say that's the question. So now you have to talk about a situation. So now we're going to break down what the STAR method is. So if you don't think that's the right link, oops. Sorry about that. Sorry. Oh, you're right. Yeah, it was wrong. My bad. I don't know why. Okay. Thank you for catching that. Thank you. We're going to try that again. All right. There we go. That's the right link. Okay, that's the link that I referred to. Thank you for catching that. I did not catch that at all. So the STAR method, starting with S. S is situations. That is introducing the situation to set a scene and providing context. So I think this is a step a lot of people tend to skip. They tend to just skip right into the task. The reason that this is important is, 1, making sure that you've understood what the interviewer said and that you are framing what your answer to the question that they ask. And so if they ask me, tell me about a time you worked on a team, and then I tell them about a time that I worked soloed, that just shows that I wasn't listening to a word that they said. And so explaining the situation also provides context to, okay, here are all the factors and things that were going on, and here is the dynamic that I was coming into to solve this problem. So to give an example, we're going to use working in a team. So if I were to introduce a situation, I would say, when I was a freshman in college, I took a leadership class, and part of that class required a group project of submitting about our strengths and weaknesses and creating a PowerPoint on it. I was on a team with 3 other people. We had never met each other before. We were all freshmen, and the problem was, what was the problem? I guess, okay, so I'm going too far ahead. And so that's kind of the situation, kind of thing. And I guess in the problem, what was the problem that I faced there? I think the problem was that there were 2 people who had like very opposing viewpoints on what the actual, like, what deliverable we wanted to provide. I think like half of us wanted to do like a PowerPoint and the other half wanted to do a Prezi. It was really dumb. It was like, we were freshmen. The issues that we had weren't that great. And so that was the situation. So through that example, I told you, hey, here's where I was. So I told you, what year was I in, what class I was taking, what context was I actually working in a group, and what the group project was about. So all of that gives context to the situation. Then I kind of mix this in. So then we talked about the action that needed to be done. So this usually addresses the problem or kind of the key thing that the interviewer wants to know about. So the interviewer, they had asked them the situation, tell me about a time that you worked on a team where you got, I think it was like conflicting views or like didn't get along. And so the didn't get along part is really what they're looking for. They want to hear about how you worked in a team, but they also want the underlying question underneath this is, how do you handle conflict in a team? That's what they really want to know. And so when you answer the task, you really want to make sure your task revolves around that. And so I kind of mentioned it before, but the task was we needed to create a presentation about our strengths and weaknesses. And the conflict was that half the team wanted to approach this one way and the other half wanted to approach it the other way, the PowerPoint versus like the Prezi. And so it was difficult to determine which way we wanted to go because it was split 50-50. Half of us wanted to do one, the other half wanted to do another. So that was the task. The task was we needed to select a PowerPoint presentation to do, and we didn't know if we wanted to use like the Microsoft official presentation or Prezi. Then you have the action. So explaining the action you took. So you've set up the context, you set up the situation, and you talked about the task that you did. Now, actually talk about what you did. How did you resolve that conflict? And people tend to skip right to this, they tend to do TAR. They don't do STAR. They do TAR, or maybe they do R, AR. And so it's very important that you don't just say what you did, but you also provide a lot of context to it. And also another big part of this method that I will say is that it really emphasizes communication. That is the number one skill that organizing like companies and internships and full-time fellows are looking for, not just your technical skills, because chances of most of the time when I joined Microsoft, for example, I had to learn C#. I didn't know C# before coming into it. That was something that they could teach me on the job. You can't really teach communication. I mean, you can, but like it's something that, it makes it difficult if you don't have that skill coming in, which is why soft skills are so important. So that's why you ask, why do I need to set up the situation? Why do I need to do all of this work? It's not because they really want to know. They might, but that's not really the case. The reason is because they want to show, can you clearly articulate a situation that happened to you and explain it to somebody who wasn't there? That's the value of the STAR method. I see a question. Is there a right answer for a behavioral question, or is it up to their interpretation? That's a really good question. There isn't really a right answer to it. There are, I guess there are obviously certain stories maybe you shouldn't tell. I think the right answer is more of, did you answer the question that they asked for? What story you select, whether or not like, do I want to tell the story about the time I worked on a team project in a class, or if I want to talk about a past internship that I did. Like the context of the story doesn't really matter. The right answer, quote unquote, is really going to be, did you, if they're asking for how you resolved conflict, did you give a situation where you resolved conflict? That's kind of the right answer. So however you choose to do that is up to you. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question there. So then the action, what did you actually do? And so I don't remember what we did. I think what we did was like we sat down and we wrote down like pros and cons of why we should use like Microsoft presentation versus Prezi. And then we kind of did like a democratic raising your hand. So that's saying, okay, how did you actually resolve the conflict? Because you can't just tell the story and then not resolve the conflict. So tell them what you did to fix it. And then this last part, which I think is actually the key part of the STAR method. This is kind of what makes this framework differentiate from all the other frameworks, is the results. So describe the result in terms of benefits realized. So this not only ties a bow into the story you're telling, you have a beginning, middle, and end. You have a conflict and a resolution. It also shows that you are reflective and introspective and that you're learning from those experiences. So a question that I think I'm going to be doing as a practice later is, tell me about a time that you failed. And so you can tell them about the time that you failed, but really the other part that the interviewer wants to know is, did you learn from that failure? So in the case of resolving conflict, not only how did you resolve the conflict, and what did you learn from that experience to ensure that that conflict doesn't show up again? Because you can say, I resolved this conflict this way, but if you join their company and then you cause that same conflict, that's going to show that you didn't learn from the experiences that you have. So that's the value of results. And so in terms of this scenario where I'm working with my team, so we worked with our team, the groups of 4, PowerPoint versus Prezi. We did like a pros and cons. The results of it was ended up picking presentation. Of course we did. And I learned to always set team norms and standards at the beginning of a team meeting when we're working in a team. So what I mean by that is when you start in a team, rather than jumping right into the project, usually that's asking, communication style. How would you like to communicate? Software and technology, which is relevant to this situation. Do y'all like to use PowerPoint? Do you like to use Prezi? Or, do you want me to text you, or do you want me to email you, or is Slack a better method? And, how into the communication styles, are you someone do you want to be the team lead of the project? If we would have established a team lead, that would have maybe made it easier to decide rather than, having to like raise our hands and choose a certain software to use. And so those are all the reflections that I had and what I learned from that situation, so that if the situation happens again, I'm better equipped to handle it. That's the STAR method. That is the beauty. It's all, I would say you can usually answer a question with the STAR method in about a minute or less. Maybe a little bit more depending on how much context you need to provide. But this is a tried and true method. I don't think there's unless it's like a yes or no question, I don't think there's been a situation where I haven't used the STAR method. And you can use this anywhere, not just in like technical interviews. You can use this like if you're interviewing for, a job in your campus, or, you're talking to somebody or doing an interview, like this, just like an interview in the sense of like on a podcast or something, not like a technical interview. STAR method works. All right. We got half an hour left. I promise we're right at the end. Just wanted to let you, I know we're slugging along, but we're getting right to the end goals here. So now let's go to the next part. So, okay. Oh, I guess I covered that, but now we're gonna jump back a second. So now that you know the tools, you know what the STAR method is, now we're gonna cover the different interviews you will expect. I will fly through this one because there's not much. The recruiter interview. As I mentioned, this is typically optional, not optional for you to do, but the company may or may not do this interview. It really depends. This is really to assess the qualifications and make sure you meet the basic criteria. So, do you know what the role entails? Do you know the location? Do you know the company you're applying for? Are you sometimes they say you have to be US based or a certain country based. Are you that based? It's usually very low key and very low stress. I don't think I failed a recruiter interview during my entire 5 years. The only time that you fail a recruiter interview is if you just don't meet the criteria. So if they're asking like, hey, you need 2 years in this particular field, or you need to have a master's, for example. Say the role required you need a master's degree, and I come in and apply and I have an undergrad, the recruiter interview is going to reject me because they're like, yeah, there's no point in doing this interview any longer. So that's the interview that you'll have. I wouldn't be too stressed about this type of interview. Like I said, it really is just checking to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then next steps, then they usually pass you along to the technical assessment or technical interview. Some questions. I would say the biggest thing is asking questions, because the recruiter is the source of truth for this company. And so asking questions about, the company values and the morals, flexibility of the location, outline of the, what happens next, what should I expect in the next part of this interview, and who should I be contacting moving forward. So those are all the questions and there's more, but I would say those are kind of the big questions you should be asking, which is also just a general thing. Always ask questions during an interview. You don't want to be in a situation where you finish an interview and then the interviewer is like, hey, do you have any questions for me? And you're like, no. Don't do that. Don't be that person. I would say in the grand scheme of things, it's not gonna like affect your score, but I would say it's usually gonna tiebreak it. If there are two applicants who have equal level of skill and one of them seems more interested in the role than the other, they're gonna hire that person. So I would say always ask questions, because it just shows that you're interested. And chances are you probably do have questions. Unless you've applied to this role like 5 times, you probably don't know what it's like to be an intern at this company. This is a great time to ask those questions. So kind of an aside, always ask questions. Next, cultural and behavioral interviews. So I kind of touched on this before. So goals and what they are looking for. So the first things first is communication. I mentioned this before. Can you effectively describe an experience in a way a third party or someone who wasn't there can understand what's happening? That is the biggest skill that they're looking for. Then they're talking about reflection and introspection. I covered that at the end. Can you talk about past events, learn from them, and use that to guide future decisions? That's basically just reflection. Can you reflect, and can you learn, and can you grow? Skills. So this might play a role depending on the behavioral interview that you have. Are the stories that you tell, do they accurately like detail the skills that you need to be successful? So they want you to tell them about a time that you were a leader on the team, and then you tell them about a time where you weren't a leader on the team. They're looking for leadership skills, but your answer didn't tell them that you were actually a leader. And another thing, show don't tell. That's kind of the part of the behavioral interviews, is you want to show that you have these skills rather than on your resume you're basically telling them. You're saying, "Hey, I am a leader because I've done all of these things." In a interview, they want you to show that you have those skills by talking about an experience that forces you to talk about it. And I see the comment. Thank you for the session. It's really cool of you. Of course, I've been there. I've been in those shoes. And like I said, this is only the first one. I have to do this 3 more times, 3 more times, and it's going to be technical, which I'm excited for. I think the technical part will be a bit more fun. But I have to cover this because this is very important information. So yes, thank you. For those who have been here for like an hour and a half, like, oh my God, like, like, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully this is very useful to you. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, I've been talking, like my throat is so, it's not sore, but I've been talking for an hour and a half. And so I'm so grateful for the people who are here right now. So yeah, and we're not done. Sorry, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to say all this. Like, all right, we're not done yet. We still have time. We're still reaching the end. But I just wanted to stop and say thank you all for being here and listening. I appreciate it. So then finally, company fit. This is kind of a more subjective thing that they're looking for. They may not ask you directly, but I just want you to keep it in mind. Does your personality, does who you are fit with the company vibe? And are you friendly, easy to get along with and work with? So that's kind of what they're looking for in those questions they ask you is, how well do you work on a team? What they're really asking is, can I work with this person, basically? When you're talking to them, are you friendly? Are you approachable? Are you respectful? This might be something they gauge more in an on-site when you're actually, talking to them and you're in person. But really what they're seeing is, okay, if the team is more self-sufficient, they want to make sure that you fit that company team of being self-sufficient. They don't want to hire somebody who needs a lot of help in learning something if the team that they're hiring you for is a team that learned everything by themselves. Nothing wrong with either approach. It's just a team culture. So just keep that in mind. That might be something you might not be able to control. It really depends on if you fit the vibe, and that it's a vibe check. It's basically, do you fit the vibe check of the team? And so I would say that's just the way you do your research, understand what the company is looking for, and then cater your interviewing style to that. With that, now talk about the tips, which I've kind of talked about before, and I kind of have done a bad job with one of these. And so, but we're going to cover that. The first thing is doing research on the company and the recruiters beforehand. There are situations where, they invite you to a link, like a Google like Google Calendar link or meeting or whatever, and they might attach the recruiters or the interviewers to that link. What I always do is if I know John Smith is joining the meeting, you best believe I'm looking up John Smith on LinkedIn and learning about his background, learning about his role, how long he's been at the company, and just understanding, who I'm working with, who I'm talking to, and then catering my speech to that person. Now, what I will say is that I tend not to use that information in an interview. If I look up that John Smith likes to go skiing on Fridays, it's probably not a good idea to mention in the interview, I see that you like to ski on Fridays type of thing. Kind of because it just seems a little creepy. I don't know. And so it's look them up, do the research, but don't rely on that to ask, to do asking the questions. I would say it's just more for context gathering as opposed to using that information, because you don't want them to know that you're looking them up. That's the thing. It's a skill. You want to look them up, but you don't want them to know that. You just kind of want to be comfortable and know that, okay, I know who's coming into the call. It's not a complete stranger. Talk slow. I struggle with this so much. You might have already known. You don't have to tell me. I know. I talk fast. And that is something, yeah, exactly. You don't want them to know that you're stalking them, but you want to stalk them. You want to stalk them, but don't tell them that you're stalking them, because then that just, yeah, don't stalk them. and don't make it obvious that you're stalking them. Sometimes I think I had a mistake one time where I looked someone up and they had like LinkedIn Premium. And so with LinkedIn Premium, you know if somebody views your page. And so I think I had viewed somebody's page, and then in the interview, they were like, "Oh yeah, I saw that you looked at my page on LinkedIn." And I was like, "Oh no." So don't do that. So sometimes it's a hit or miss. Do your best. But yeah, that was what role was that? I don't remember. Even if I did know the role, I might not tell you that. But I don't know if I got that role. So yeah, be careful basically with that one. Next one, talk slow. I struggle with talking slow. I am a fast talker because there's a lot of thoughts in my head and I'm just like getting them out there. But in an interview, you very much want to talk slow because it shows that you're in control. It shows that you're thinking about what you want to say. It just when you're talking slow, it really just it creates a sense of command. Like, oh my gosh, they're not. When you talk fast, it tends to seem like you're stressed or you don't know what to say and you're stumbling, or it makes it seem like you're nervous. So that's why talking slow is so important, and I'm trying that right now because I talk very fast. Talking slow just makes you, it also prevents the uhs and the ums. I think I do a generally good job. I did some uhs and ums earlier on, but generally if you have issues with kind of those filler texts, talking slow, and instead of filling the space with ums, just let it sit. If you don't know what to say, think about it. Think about what you want to say and then say it, rather than thinking about what you're gonna say and then saying it. And so that's one tip I have. Practicing talking slow, recording yourself so you can hear yourself. Second account. Yeah, I'm not endorsing it. Hey, let me just put it on the record. I'm looking at you, putting it on the record. I am not saying to create a second account. Y'all do what you want. I'm not telling you to do that. All right. And then I say, literally right after I told you not to say that. All right. Avoiding sounding monotone. Express yourself in your personality. The whole point of the cultural and behavioral interviews is to show that you're a cool person that they want to hire. And so you want to be expressive. You want to try to sound like you're engaged and that you're excited and that you're interested and that you have a range. You don't want to sound like this the whole time, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, she's so boring. I don't know if she, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to sound like that. You want to sound like you're like, not like, I mean, I'm kind of animated, and so because like I think after the 1 hour and 30-minute mark, I'm suddenly getting all of this energy. I don't know if it's because I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're finishing up. But I know that when I speak, I tend to be very animated. You don't have to be this animated, but just watch your tone. Make sure you understand how you show up to an interview. So that's that one. Come prepared with stories and experiences. One thing that I did, which was so helpful, was before an interview, I would just get a Google Docs or like a text editor, and I would just write down the different stories that I had. And so I would write down how I was a leader in my student government. I would write down how I resolved conflict. I would write down I would go online and search the top 30 behavioral interview questions. I would think about what I would say, and then I'd write it down. So then when the interview comes, I come prepared. Now, you don't want to rehearse it to the point where it sounds robotic, but there've been so many situations where they ask me a question like, okay, how well have you worked in the team? And the interview, you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, I don't know a story that would work with that. And so coming prepared and having stories ready to grab when you do the interview, that works out well too. Energy drinks. I drink coffee in the morning. As you see, I am someone who is like very animated, and so after the second cup of coffee, my eye starts to twitch because I'm just someone who I'm very sensitive to caffeine, so I can only do 1 cup of coffee a day. Otherwise, I tend to get very, very excited. So if you can do energy drinks, go for it. I know people who like energy drinks. Like my partner, he likes to drink energy drinks like a Monster, and I'm like, God, I don't know how you do that, because I can't drink a Monster or like Red Bull or like those 5-hour energies. You do you. I can't do that. So, but that's a good tip. Yeah, if you need something to kind of pep up your step, that is a good way to do so. Don't come in like all jittery though, because then that makes you seem nervous. You don't want to seem nervous. You want to seem that you're excited. So there's a fine line. So yeah, come prepared. prepare their stories in advance, apply the STAR method beforehand, and then finally asking questions at the end. And so I have a few of those questions listed here. You can go online. There are a lot of like websites that kind of list questions that you should ask. Always come prepared with at least one or two questions. Please don't go there without a question. So then some of the questions that I typically ask is like, their experience at the company, being honest, like asking, yeah, hey, do you like working here? And a lot of the times they're like, oh yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. What they liked and didn't like, their future long-term goals. Do they want to get promoted? Why they chose to work here? This is a really good question for like an intern, because as an intern, you're choosing whether or not you want to be here full time. And so you want to ask somebody who is in a very similar situation how they made that choice. So those are usually my grab bag of questions that I tend to ask. Another thing is to also listen to the interviewer when they're introducing themselves. Listen to what team are they on, what type of work are they doing, because then that can help feed the questions that you ask, and it also shows the interviewer that you're paying attention to them. So if they mention like, hey, I was on the modeling team and then I moved to, I don't know, the supply chain, they moved to a different team, and then in the questions I can be like, hey, so you mentioned that you swapped teams. What was the reason for that swap? Was it because you were unhappy with the team, or there's something you changed skill sets? You know what I mean? So listening to what they say and then using that at the end is like that's like my like top tips, is because it shows that you're listening, and that's a really good skill. All right, and so I kind of covered some of these examples here. So tell me about a time you worked with someone. I deciphered that in the STAR method. I am going to cover, just because for the sake of time, I'm only going to do one of these, and I'm going to get that link. I'm actually going to give you the right link this time. So these are the links of like the top 30 interview questions that might show up. So I would recommend looking at those and just start preparing in advance. That's my number one tip. But what I will do is I will do number 2. Tell me about a time you failed. How did you deal with the situation? And I'm going to do this on the fly. So like I've done this interview question a lot of times, but I don't have a script right now. So I'm going to tell you, if somebody asked me this question, I'm going to show you how I would answer it right now. So interviewers, like, tell me about a time you failed. How did you deal with the situation? So now, in character. All right. So one time that I had failed. I have a good story. So during my freshman year, I was employed at an office at my university. It was called the Leadership Minor Office. It was an office that supported students who had the leadership minor. I served as an IT specialist, and one of the tasks that I was equipped with was creating a video for students who are transitioning to the university. So transfer students. We wanted to show the transfer students that, hey, this is an amazing minor and we really want you to join. Here are all the reasons why you should join the minor. So that's what I was working on. The task with that, I needed to create this video. I had struggled with creating the video. I didn't have any experience in video development or video editing at all. And so the idea of setting up a camera, recording people, creating a script, editing the video, and adding like effects was all very foreign to me. And so I had taken several weeks to do what was presumably a very simple task. My boss had reached out to me and they told me, hey, you're not performing at the level that we want you to perform. Here's the feedback, and here's kind of the new deadlines. That was the first time that I ever had feedback from a boss that I was not doing what they wanted me to do on a job. And that was really humble. It was a really humbling experience for me, because it made me realize, okay, my approach to solving problems wasn't working. I need to find a different way to build this video. And so what I had done was, one, I learned that I need to rely on my resources. There were other students in the office that did have experience with video editing. And so they taught me how to use the video editing software. And also one thing that I struggled with was time management on the job. I didn't spend enough time on the job doing what I was supposed to do. I wouldn't tell them this, but I would be like, oh, I would be stumbling on the job or not paying attention to the what do I want to say there? I would be like on my phone on the job, or like I said, I wouldn't actually tell them this, but just to give you an example of things you would say. And so I found better ways to schedule my time. So I'd come into the office and I would say, hey, here are the top 3 things that I need to get done today. And then I could, keep myself accountable. And I'd also have more regular check-ins with my managers so that they knew what I was working on. Because of all of those changes, I was able to create a wonderful video on transfer students to join the leadership minor office, and we posted it on the YouTube channel, and it's been on the homepage ever since. And one thing I just learned there was taking taking negative feedback from my boss and understanding that it may not be a reflection of myself, but using it as a learning opportunity to enhance my skills and be more efficient at my job. All right, out of character. So that's what. So as you see, it's not perfect. I definitely stumbled at the end there, but let's recap what I just did there. So I set up the situation. So I was like, okay, I worked at the leadership minor office. I was an IT specialist. I set up the task that I had to do. I had to create a video for students who were transfer students to the U and to recruit them to the leadership minor office. The part of the situation was that to answer the question of how I actually failed was I got feedback that I was too slow at building this video. My action was reaching out to more people. I talked about, the areas of improvement. I talked about communicating more and collaborating with my teammates. I talked about time management. I talked about setting up recurring meetings. And then in the reflection, I talked about how it was important for me to take feedback and how it allowed me to be a better worker overall. So that's how you would use the STAR method. As you saw, it wasn't perfect. I mean, I think I've given that story like a million times because I've had this question asked to me a lot. And so that's why it seemed a little polished, because I've just told that story so many times. But that's how, if you want to see a demonstration of how that works, that's how I would answer the question. And so that's one thing I would have you practice. That took maybe a minute and a half. Like, really practice answering those questions in that format, listening to yourself. I know people don't like to record themselves, but it is such a good skill. You'll get used to it. You'll get used to how you sound on camera. You'll get used to being more comfortable in front of the camera. It just takes time. So that's what I would recommend there. And then I posted those practice questions so that you can practice doing that. And yeah, and you can go online. I think there's like a resource online where you can actually you can like not hire somebody, but somebody actually asks you the questions and then they give you feedback like live, which is cool. Like, somebody just has the time to just do that. They just volunteer their time to give you questions. So all right. That is it. That is the end of the slides that I have. And so the rest of the time is Q&A. The rest of the time is any other, we have 10 minutes. Any other questions that you guys have regarding, behavioral interviews, what to expect next, just as a heads up. So if people don't want to stay for the Q&A, part 2, that's going to be covering the most common interview questions that you get, which is going to be strings, arrays, dictionary. We're going to be going through real life examples of questions that you might expect to get, and we're going to go through the framework of how to solve those questions, and we are going to go over how, you're going to watch me code live, how I would do a problem like that, and what I would be talking about while I'm coding the problem. We're going to talk about time and space complexity, what's the runtime of the code, how to write efficient code in general. We're going to be covering all of that good stuff in part 2. That is going to be Monday, 8 p.m. ET. If you're on the Discord channel, please, you'll hear that announcement. I'm going to get the link for this presentation that I've been doing, just so that I can send it this way. I'm gonna post it here, so then if people want to see it, you have to be here for it. I'm gonna share with the link. Copy the link, copy it. Getting the link right now. I'm just going through and making sure there's nothing in here that's criminalizing. I think all this information's fine. Okay, cool. So then I'm gonna post it here. Yes, dynamic. Yes, okay, yep. I see that we're going to cover the tech for more companies first and second years. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing is dynamic programming covered. Yes, dynamic programming is going to be part of part 4. So part 2 is I mentioned strings, arrays, and dictionaries. Part 3 is going to be linked lists, graphs, and trees. Those are the ones that are like, you may see them maybe full time, but I think I've had 2 linked lists out of all. Let me go back here. Based on all the interviews I've done, I think I've had 2 linked list questions, 1 tree, and I don't think I've had a graph. So I'm still going to cover it because it's still important, and it is kind of luck based on the question that you get. So I will cover it, but those are kind of less common. I think almost every interview I've had has been like a string or an array or or like a dictionary. Then part 4 is going to cover the advanced. We're going to cover algorithms. I don't think I've had an algorithm. I think I had a merge sort at some point, but that was about it. We're going to cover algorithms, and then we're going to cover dynamic programming. So that's going to probably be more like full-time. I don't think I've been in a situation where they've asked an intern dynamic programming. That would be, if you've been in that situation, please tell me, because I've never heard of somebody asking that for an intern. And then wrapping up. So I posted in the chat the link for the slides. If you want to review it, all the links I just added, they're all in the slides. Please feel free to use it to your fit. All right. I'm going to answer these questions, and then we're going to look at those first and second years. I did not forget that. What's the dress code for tech interviews? Great question. That's actually not a silly. Why did I not cover that? I'm sorry. That's actually not a bad question at all. So what you should wear for tech interviews? I would say the safest option is business casual. So for men, that would be, a nice pair of slacks. I would avoid jeans. Yeah, I would avoid jeans, like a nice pair of slacks, and then maybe like a button-up t-shirt. And then for women, I would say, a dress is always an easy option if you want to, or for a non like gender specific, you could also wear like slacks and a nice blouse. A blazer is you can do a blazer if you want. I think a blazer is a little, if you're applying for like a full-time job, maybe a blazer. But for interns, I would say if you want to impress, blazer. If not, you don't have to have one. Decent looking shoes, like not tennis shoes. I would say like you're dressing up for an interview. I would avoid jeans, leggings for women. If it's a black pair of leggings and it's not like too body hugging, I would say it's okay. I don't know. Leggings are kind of like a toss up. I've worn leggings to interviews and it's been fine. It just depends on the leggings, obviously. Don't see through leggings. That's my point. Skirts, dresses, yeah. I would say that's how I would answer it. Biggest thing is just avoid the jeans, I would say, unless they specifically say not to. If it's a digital interview, obviously top up, where you wear top down. They don't. Some people say, oh, they don't wear anything top down. I would not do that. I would wear some pants so that if you ever have to get up, you don't like pant yourself. So that's what I would say. Okay, so that's my answer there. Everything is covered in Python. Yes, everything's going to be covered in Python. That's all I'm going to be doing. So I'm sorry if you code in Java or JavaScript, the concepts might still apply, but the code is going to be in Python, and there will be a GitHub that has those questions. We'll cover that in part 2, Monday, 8 p.m. ET. All right, last thing. Let's find that list. Okay. First and second year internship programs for software engineering. Find this list right now. Let's see. Here we go. 10 I'm gonna pull up a few, and I'm just gonna start putting them in the chat. So if you wanna look at them, but I would say, so I'm gonna read them and I'll put it in the chat. You have Microsoft, I mentioned, Google, Facebook University. Oh, Twitter Academy. I forgot about Twitter Academy. I'm gonna put this link in the chat. Twitter Academy, Bank of America, 2 Sigma has a freshman one. I talked about Palantir Path. Okay, so that's this one. So first and second year internship programs, putting it here. That's one link. I forgot about a few of them. And then we have, look at this other one. Google, Facebook. Okay, and then there's another one, Amazon. Oh, Code 2040, fantastic program. There's some I didn't go over fellowships as much, but there's some really good fellowships. If you're underrepresented, a Code 2040, I've done it. It's a fantastic. I should have added it to my list, but I lost track. Code 2040 is a fantastic program, and it's for anyone, whether you're I know people who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors who do it. So that's another thing. And then there are also additional. In that second link from the University of Virginia, there are those programs that are like recruiting programs. They're not internships, but they do expedite your interview process if you do well. And so one of them is like Capital One. They have those summits for first and second year students, or was it 2 Sigma? Jane Street. Sorry, it was Jane Street. Their Ignite program, where you have to be a second year, and that allows you to expedite into like their interview process. They have programs like that too. So just keeping that in mind, like, there are a lot of ways that you can go about doing that. Could you share the last link again? Yeah, sorry, I don't know why the last link wasn't working. There we go. Hopefully that works out. Hopefully that's better. I don't know why that link didn't send. I was gonna type out all the company names if you're still watching. So what was it? It was Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Palantir, Capital One. Maybe check browser. Yeah, I would say I posted it just in case. Capital One. What was the other one? Duolingo, Twitter. I'm just typing it out just so people have it. 2 Sigma, Bank of America. Oh yes, if you have other ones, yes, please feel free to use those ones too. There's you can go online. There's such a large list of them that you can use. So I just took basically what was in those links and just put it inside this text. I don't know why I wrote with that text there. All right, we're at the end here. We only got 40 seconds left. Can master's students apply for this too? No. So when it says first or second year programs, that is undergraduate, not master's programs. Master's programs have their own separate application process, their own separate thing. So to answer that question, I have to head out. I know we didn't have a ton of time for Q&A, but I'm gonna be running this track Monday, Thursday, and Friday. So if you want to come back and you have questions from the first one, feel free to ask it then. Thank you all so much for being here. For the people who've been here for 2 hours, oh my God, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully this was helpful to you all. And yeah, hopefully I get to see you guys in part 2. Yeah. All right. Bye everyone. Have a good rest of your days. Thank you so much. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day and there's other fantastic events going on. Please join them if you can. Of course. All right. I'm going to end the broadcast. Bye.